Greetings, welcome to the show. This is The Overview, and I'm your host, Brother Mbogo. Today I'm going to take a look at technologies, but not technologies of today. I'll be looking at some of the ancient technologies from the times of ancient Kemet, or ancient India, or say the Aztecs, and those traditional societies that used to exist, which had their own form of technology, which are not really understood today. The impression that the world has, or the contemporary Western world has, is that the ancient world didn't really have any type of developed technology. And for example, how they transported some of these the components to make up these monuments was using basic manual labor, or mass manual labor, you could say. Even the construction of these monuments themselves were looked at. In fact, they marvel, they wonder how they were able to produce or construct such monuments with so much precision in terms of the straight lines that you find in the way the larger bricks were put together. And they're still not sure how these things were done. But some ancient texts give an idea of the type of technologies they had in those days, even though in the contemporary world, or the Western world, when they read these things, they don't really take it as factual, they take it as something almost mythological. But I'll be going through some of the ancient texts in a moment. For example, I'll start with energy, and how energy was perceived then, and how it was generated, even how the earth was perceived in those ancient times in terms of energy, and the forms of energy, and how it was manipulated with their understanding of nature. So for example, looking at electricity itself, recently scientists claim they uncovered how Egypt's pyramid manipulates electromagnetic waves. And this is from the Digital Savior website. It's about pyramid power. An international group of researchers from Russia's ITMO University, along with Laser Zentrum Hanover, have discovered that electromagnetic power can focus through the inner rooms of the Great Pyramid of Giza, and beneath its base, the effect occurs on resonance conditions, where electromagnetic waves proportionally, or of the size of resonance size, excite the pyramid. So that's a bit technical, but it's saying, basically explaining how energy waves were manipulated to produce electricity. And this is another article from the same site, Digital Savior website. One of the key pillars of particular pyramid theory, this European person's pyramid power plant theory, is the role of the materials used in the construction of the Great Pyramid itself. So even the materials that make up these monuments have some kind of capacity in terms of magnetism and electricity. Ancient builders may have utilized the unique properties of natural materials to achieve something far beyond their time. The Great Pyramid, for example, was originally encased in smooth white limestone. Before, I think they're saying that the limestone that was encased in the Great Pyramid was stripped off by people who probably wanted to use the limestone in further generations down the line. The people who didn't understand the true purpose of the pyramid just saw it as something that they could use those materials for, so they stripped the white limestone from the pyramids. That's why they look the way they look today. So the Great Pyramid was originally encased in smooth white limestone. This material is thought to have had insulating properties, potentially acting as a barrier to keep energy concentrated within the structure. Then the reflective nature of the limestone might have also helped in focusing sunlight or other forms of energy, enhancing the pyramid's ability to gather or store power. So the very nature of the pyramid itself was related to some form of power generation. Then the granite within the pyramid itself, this is deeper within the pyramid. Granite was used extensively, especially in the King's Chamber, where things get exciting. Granite is rich in quartz, a material known for its piezoelectric properties. Piezoelectricity is these devices that you use to light gas stoves. It gives a spark. There's an element of quartz within that mechanism that causes the spark to take place. And then lighters that people use to light cigarettes and so forth also can work off small amount of quartz to create this piezoelectricity that sparks, that ignites the gas in the lighter so you can light your cigarette. Piezoelectricity occurs when the quartz crystals are subject to mechanical stress. So you scrape along this quartz and it causes a spark and it generates an electrical charge. And next, they're talking about vibrational energy. It's theorized that vibrations from water flowing beneath the pyramid or other natural forces could have activated this piezoelectric effect, effectively turning the granite into a source of energy. So this idea places granite not just as a structural element, but as a critical component in the hypothesized energy generation process. So they're looking at the materials that the pyramids were made of, and they're trying to figure out whether these were used in terms of generating some kind of electrical force throughout the pyramid. Some theories, this is the conductive side of things, how they suppose it may have conducted the energy. Some theories suggest that conducive metals like gold, copper, or other alloys might have been incorporated into the pyramid's design. These metals could have served as conductors, transferring energy generated within the pyramid or to other locations. The other locations I think I'll be mentioning just after this to explain how this pyramid of networks around the world may have been somehow connected in some form of power grid. Anyway, further on, I think this is talking about the limestone again. The insulating limestone, energy generating granite, and hypothetical conductive metals would have formed some form of self-contained system designed to amplify and distribute energy efficiently. And as I was saying about the water, these water channels, they're saying they discovered some kind of device or water channels below one of the pyramids recently. So this water could have provided necessary mechanical stress to trigger the piezoelectric properties in the granite. Also the shape of the pyramid. So it's saying here the pyramid's geometric shape and the natural properties of its materials might have amplified the Earth's electromagnetic energy, further fueling the system. And this is just explaining the size of the pyramid. So it was a 490-foot construction, was built by the ancient Egyptians more than 4,500 years ago. But some are arguing that the pyramids were built much earlier, so that would be around 2,500 BC. But some are arguing that it could have been built as far back as 10,000 BC, which would give the idea of human civilization developed. Some are even arguing that prior to the melting of the ice caps around 11,000 BC, some of these advanced civilizations existed, and what civilizations such as Egypt and maybe the Indus Kush, what they did was inherited some of the knowledge from previous civilizations, which are not really acknowledged across the West because they've built up their own understanding of how history has taken place. But when some form of discovery or information which comes along which contradicts their version of history, they tend to ignore it or put it down to some kind of myth. Anyway, let me continue. And this is talking about the Ankh behaving as some kind of resonance key. You know, the Kemetic Ankh, the symbol of life, as they call it, or cross of life they mention here, is seen as some kind of resonance key for certain forms of frequencies. So in terms of the broader distribution of these pyramids and how they formed a network or some kind of power grid, first I'll mention the different places around the world where they found pyramids or some are arguing that they're supposedly pyramids, but basically the pyramids are not just in Egypt or Sudan, they're in various regions of the world. So you're talking about Mexico, Peru, China, Bosnia, India, Indonesia, Sudan, Greece, Italy and Spain, so even throughout Europe, and in Eastern Europe, Russia, Japan, the US, Turkey, and Brazil. So in various regions of the world you found pyramids. Some are supposing that these pyramids were they were somehow linked in this power generation. Well, not just power generation, I've been mentioning other reasons for their possible development in a while. So they're arguing here that there's a possibility that there was an advanced global civilization that may have existed long before this Western interpretation of history. So these pyramids could have been used to harness energy, transmit knowledge, or even function as markers for celestial navigation. So they've been placed around key ley lines, these lines of energy that around different regions of the planet. And there are possible correlations with star constellations, such as the Orion correlation. That's one theory based in Kemet, Egypt, and also the star alignments in Mexico. Okay. And finally, as I was saying, there are energy centers. Some believe pyramids were used to generate, store, or transmit energy, possibly through this piezoelectric force that the granite could generate. And they could have been also astronomical observatories. You know, many ancient societies, or what perceived as simplistic societies, were able to map the stars, and they knew the alignment of the stars and when certain stars or certain alignments took place. Yeah, maybe because this current environment, if you live in cities, you can't really see the stars. This electrical lighting system or artificial lighting system that you see at night blocks out man's ability to see the stars or observe the stars in the sky properly. So them, in their natural environment, had more time to look at the stars over long periods of time, and they were able to map and see the alignment of stars and how that relates. There's also a spiritual aspect to this as well, which I'm not going to discuss today, in terms of how the planetary alignments affect human behavior in the same way that the moon affects the water levels when there's a full moon. Anyway, continuing. Many pyramids are precisely aligned with celestial bodies, indicating that they could have been used for astronomical tracking or even timekeeping. And as I said about the spiritual and ceremonial sites, pyramids may have been built as places of worship, spiritual enlightenment, or as sacred temples dedicated to the deities. But some of the deities themselves are aligned to certain star constellations and certain planets. So obviously there's a spiritual aspect to these understanding the planets and how they align, and in the alignment of the pyramids themselves. So that's in terms of energy. I'm also going to take a look at this idea of flight. I know mentioned in certain ancient texts, two of which I'm going to discuss here. There's the concept of flight or flying machines, or ancient flying machines, which some equate to UFOs or these alien ships or something like that. But it could also have been technology developed in those times by the people here on Earth, rather than some alien coming along and developing. You know, there are different concepts that some have, that even humans themselves were developed by aliens. You know, these strange ideas, not that man developed naturally on Earth, and man has the capacity to have a certain amount of understanding and enlightenment through their own growth. Some think it's not possible, that it must have been aliens that granted humans or gave humans the capacity to have greater understanding and enlightenment. Anyway, I'm talking here about Vimana. Vimana is a Sanskrit word. It has various meanings, including palace or temple, but in the context of ancient texts, it was also often depicted as aerial vehicles, chariots or spacecraft used by the gods demigods or powerful beings. And they were said to have the ability to travel vast distances through the sky, sometimes even between planets or realms of existence. So in the Vedic texts, these ancient Hindu texts, they are described as, these texts, the epics of Ramayana and Mahabharata, where they describe these Vimanas in detail. They are sometimes referred to as celestial chariots or flying palaces. One of the most famous mentions of a Vimana comes from the Ramayana, where the character of Ravana uses a flying vehicle called the Pushpaka Vimana to abduct Sita and transport her to his kingdom of Lanka. So these Vimanas were capable of flight both within Earth and possibly beyond. That is the interpretation. And there's some drawings here showing something that looks like a rocket, or you might also say it looks like a tall building, a V-shaped tall building, or something similar to a pyramid, but not the typical pyramid triangular shape. So the materials and design were discovered or understood. The Samarangana Sutra, an 11th century Sanskrit treatise on architecture and mechanics, describes the construction of these Vimanas using lightweight materials such as wood and metals. These vehicles were supposedly powered by energy sources like mercury or wind. But could a rocket made of wood travel into the outer atmosphere? That one's a bit dubious, really. Even though it's possible that it could have been levitating or flying somehow. So in some texts they're described as multi-level flying palaces containing various rooms, seating areas, and even weapons. And they also continuing with the idea of weapons. They were equipped with powerful weaponry, including beams of light or energy, making them fearsome tools of war. And the text also described battles in the war involving these advanced flying machines where devastating forces were released. So that is in the ancient Hindu texts. I'm going to look up now at the Ethiopian text, which also mentions something about flying vehicles used in this Kibra Nagast is an ancient Ethiopian biblical text. Here is dealing with the Old Testament in the times of Solomon. So the first I'll mention here, the archangel Michael led the way. He cut a path for them and sheltered them from heat. Neither man nor beast touched the ground with their feet, but were carried along above the ground with the speed of the bat and the eagle. And even the wagons were borne along without touching the earth. So they have these flying wagons which were not touching the earth. And the camels and the wagons, 6,000 in number, which are laden with beautiful things of most desirable kind, and wagons wherein loads were carried over the desert, and a vessel wherein one could travel over the sea, not touching the water itself. And the third one, the sea worshipped Zion, which whilst it billows were tossing about like the mountains, their wagons were raised above the waves for a space of 3 cubits. So 3 cubits, a cubit is about a meter. So 3 meters or so above the earth. It may not be a meter, but from what I remember, it was about a meter. And among the sound of the songs, the noise of the breaking of the waves, the sea was wonderful. So something that was raised up to 3 meters above the water. And having loaded their wagons, none of them traveled on the ground, but in wagons that were suspended in the air. They were swifter than the eagles that are in the sky, and all their baggage traveled with them in wagons above the winds. As for us, we thought that thou hadst in thy wisdom made them to travel in wagons above the winds. And the king said unto them, Was Zion the tabernacle of the law of God with them? And they said unto him, We did not see anything. But basically talking about these wagons that could fly above the ground or above the sea, and fly swifter than an eagle. So what does that mean? Something that could fly faster than an eagle and fly above the wind, so which means it was flying pretty high in the sky. So that's it doesn't go into details about how the technology worked, but it does say that they had crafts that could fly above the earth or above the sea. And this technology, this last one, is about sound and how sound was used to levitate. Now, there's a theory also that the pyramids were built with the use of sound frequencies to levitate the stones that made up the pyramids, and even levitate them from the long distances where they found them to take them to where the pyramids were constructed. So this is from the I'll look at the document to see where it's from. Let me have a look. You know, these technologies of ancient times, when people see anything mentioning ancient technology, for example, there have been found under the sea, below sea level, monuments and buildings which are quite ancient, but contemporary archaeologists tend to ignore them because they don't fit the narrative, their own narrative out of world history in terms of where these great civilizations are or when the civilizations existed, because many of these monuments would have existed prior to the historical period that these people acknowledge that civilizations began to develop and existed. So they tend to ignore the findings of some people who say that these monuments go back further than some of the well-known civilizations that we are aware of. Anyway, this document is from the Kibra Nagast. I think it was translated by Wallace Budge, the one who translated one of the ancient texts, Egyptian texts, the Book of the Dead, he translated. He also translated this version of the Kibra Nagast, in which it mentions certain flying devices. And that was but this one here, dealing with sound. Let me have a look at it. Acoustic levitation. Talks about acoustic levitation and the monks of Tibet, who revealed some knowledge to one traveler who spent some time with them. So one theory credits the building of the pyramids and other megalithic monuments to acoustic levitation. No first-hand accounts exist, but later written testimony provides some intriguing and suggestive clues. Abul Hassan Ali al-Masudi, an Arab historian from the 10th century, wrote about ancient Egypt and the methods he alleges they used to move massive stones, including those used to build the pyramids. He claimed that a magic papyrus imprinted with symbols was placed under each stone, after which a metal rod was struck against the stone to initiate the levitation process. According to al-Masudi, the stone would be, you know this, when you put some text under something, it's usually some kind of psychic connection between probably people who are meditating as well as the striking the rock with some kind of metal rod. Maybe there was some form of meditation also taking place by the priest to cause the levitation to take place, not just the sound frequencies itself. According to al-Masudi, the stone would be guided along a fenced path with metal poles placed on each side. Some believe these poles could have been used to create high-frequency sound vibrations, which would have been responsible for creating the levitation effect. But then again, the priests could have been involved in that process as well. It's also going on to say, but the Great Pyramid of Giza does possess some extraordinary acoustic properties, demonstrating the capacity to dramatically amplify sounds generated at certain frequencies. The Egyptians who built their pyramids on Giza Plateau clearly knew a lot about sound and knew how it could be used to produce powerful effects, possibly including levitation. And this one is about the priest in Tibet. So it's a medical doctor named John, who He visited Tibet in 1939 to treat a Tibetan Buddhist holy man who was suffering from some form of illness. After spending some time among the monks, he eventually gained their confidence, and to show their appreciation, they performed a demonstration in sonic levitation. In a clearing, the monks arranged 19 musical instruments, that's 13 drums and 6 trumpets, in a 90-degree arc around a large heavy stone. On cue, they began to play these instruments in unison, singing and chanting at the same time. After a few moments, the stone suddenly lifted into the air, and it continued to rise until it landed on a hilltop perched approximately 250 meters above the ground. So some of these priests that we see around have certain capabilities which they probably don't show, according to this, they probably don't show the general public. But through spiritual practices and also some of the technical abstract, what kind of knowledge do you call that? This is traditional, you might put it under traditional knowledge or advanced traditional knowledge, which they are able to use to cause these type of things to take place. So ancient civilizations, as I was saying, have a certain understanding of the planet different from the Western, probably highly physical understanding of the world. In terms of how they see technology, they see nature and the components of nature like rocks and so forth, or even plants and so forth, in a particular way which restricts their understanding of how you can use or how we are somehow connected and aligned to nature. The Western way of looking at things is to separate man from nature and extract certain elements from nature that they perceive. For example, when you make a medicine, you take a herbal or a plant to use as a medicine, they only extract a certain component from the plant, and not knowing that that component acting with the whole plant can affect the body in a way which is more holistic than just extracting one singular component from the plant when you're going through the healing process. And even the use of things like light and sound and other forms of energy in the healing process is not something that is understood in the Western understanding of things like medicine, or even how these things can affect the mind. Anyway, that was a brief look at certain ancient technologies. The next program, I might look at some of these technologies more specifically, or look at some other ancient technologies in terms of how they affect the mind. But that is it for now.